It's 2:31 by my clock. So I will call to order this meeting of the Erie County Board of Elections. Mr. Smith, will you please conduct a roll call?
Mrs. Showerman,
Here.
Ms. Valella, Chairwoman Rennie,
Here. Thank you. Right, we will move to the next item on the agenda, and that is a hearing of the public. I don't believe that anyone signed up to speak. However, if there is anyone from the public who wishes to be heard, I invite you to do so now. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard? Anyone from the public who wishes to be heard? Anyone from the public who wishes to be heard? All right, thank you. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the approval of minutes of the previous meeting. This includes February 25th and the emergency meeting of March 24th. I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from both meetings,
So moved.
and I will second that. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Smith, if you will do a roll call on the vote.
on the approval of minutes from February 25th and March 24th. Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Chairwoman Rennie,
Yes. All right, next on the agenda is possible board action. One of the items, and I'm just mentioning this for a future meeting, we talked about the possibility of appointing a vice chair, and I will invite our solicitor, Mr. Tallarico, to chime in if he thinks it appropriate. But I also want to mention that while we do have enough members of the board to meet the requirements of the administrative code, I think it might be, in viewing what the situation we've had over the last couple of months, I don't think it would be a bad idea to consider for council to consider appointing an additional member to the board. So what I'm suggesting is that perhaps we do that at the same time. I could consult with council president about the possibility of appointing a second member and possibly do a vice chair appointment at the same time. Mr. Tallarico, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that you should entertain, I mean, if the chair so chooses, to entertain a motion for the appointment of the vice chairperson, and then vote on
You think we can do that in this meeting?
it. Well, it's not on the agenda, is it?
No, it's not.
So we could amend the agenda first, which would require 2 votes. And then you could, then there would be the motion, if you so choose, for the appointment of a vice chair.
May I say something?
Yes, Ellen, I see your hand is up. Thank you.
I think when we talked about this last time, weren't we going to wait until the primaries were over?
We had talked about doing that. And the only reason I bring it up now, I think, was because of the number of items that have come up. Now, whether it will continue to be an issue, I don't think the fact that we don't have a vice chair has been an issue, but the fact
Right.
that we have 3 members, to me, is somewhat of an issue, even though it does meet the minimum requirements. um, I would imagine we would have at least one more meeting before the primary.
That's
And,
likely.
so we would have one more meeting. And then we would know, I suppose, whether another appointment would be necessary. Councilwoman Showerman, do you have any other thoughts on whether to move forward now to make an appointment? Then the agenda?
For a fourth person on the,
No, that would be a council action. Am I correct?
right.
Yes.
As far as the vice chair, I think that's fine to wait.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Mr. Talarico.
Yes, I mean, the administrative code provides that there should be a vice chairperson, and it shouldn't have anything to do with the primary or general election.
Okay,
That would be the reason to have a vice chair would be because the election, because the administrative code provides for a vice chairperson on the election, board.
then that
Also,
answers that.
also the issue regarding the appointment of additional members to the election board is also based on the administrative code. And it would be the election board that would create the additional members, not county council.
All right. Thank you for that correction. I appreciate that. With parliamentary procedure, as far as the nomination, would it be proper for me as the chair to make the nomination for vice chair?
Didn't Mary Clark do this?
That was.
Would be-
I'm not sure if he heard that.
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
It's
No,
also
I was,
muted.
thank you, Mr. Talarico. I was just questioning parliamentary procedure when we only have two members of the board on at this time. And whether it would be proper for me as the chair to make the nomination for vice chair, pending an amendment to the agenda.
It would be appropriate for you to ask for a motion for the appointment of the vice chair. Okay, and then it's fine that you second it.
All right.
So it's no different than when at the first meeting of the election board where Doug would ask for a vote for the chair. Once the chair is voted upon and you become the chair, then you would ask for a motion for the election of a vice chair.
Yeah, the only reason I mentioned that is that the person who would make the nomination would be essentially nominating themselves, in this case, Councilwoman Showerman.
That's fine.
That's
You're allowed to
fine.
you could be selfish. It's okay.
Councilwoman Showerman, I would like to ask for an amendment, a motion to amend the agenda to appoint a vice chair at this time.
Okay,
If
I make a motion to amend the agenda to promote a vice chair.
I second that motion. Mr. Smith, if you could do roll call on the amendment to the agenda.
On the motion to amend the agenda to include the selection of a vice chair of the Erie County Election Board, Mrs. Showerman,
Yes,
Chairwoman Rennie,
Yes.
Okay, then I guess I make a motion to nominate myself, even though that feels uncomfortable, for vice chair.
I second the nomination. It's been properly moved and seconded. Mr. Smith, will you conduct a roll call?
and the
On the-
nomination of Ellen Showerman as Vice Chairwoman of the Erie County Election Board. Mrs. Showerman,
Yes,
Chairwoman Rennie,
Yes.
it passes unanimously.
All right. And as far as appointing a fourth member, I believe that we can bring that to a future meeting as well. It would be a proposal of nominating somebody else to serve on the election board. So I don't believe that we would be adding it to today's agenda. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I
All
think
right.
it's fine to wait.
Well, we would have to have a nominee essentially. So,
Right.
all right. Very well, then we will move on to the election report. Mr. Smith?
Board, did you want me to go through the proposed changes, Mrs. Rennie?
Yes, I would, just for public knowledge. If you could review them as outlined in the agenda.
Sure. The first relocation of polling place under consideration is for the 2nd District of Mill Creek Township. 2 elections ago now, the Kearsarge Fire Company housed that district. In October of last year, they notified us, actually it was 4 days before the election, they notified us that they did not wish to have their facility used as a polling place. The board made an emergency change without the benefit of a formal vote. So this formalizes the move from the Kearsarge Fire Company to the Church of Christ, 2317 West Grandview. It's less than a half mile away from the fire company. It is in the district, and we in fact voted there several years ago when the fire company was going under some rehabilitation or rehab their building. They're very cooperative and eager to participate in the election process, and they've been very easy to deal with. So I recommend approval by the board. The second area is the 2nd District of the City of Corey. This formalizes a move back to the YMCA building, 906 North Center Street. November 2020, we were notified by the YMCA that due to some construction, they could not have the election in the gym. So we moved temporarily to the Evangelical United Methodist Church, which is across the street from the Y. Fortunately, this did not present any issues for voters because of its close proximity. And in fact, when people vote at the Y, did vote at the Y, they would often park in the church parking lot. They've also been cooperative in that respect. And I recommend this change. Lastly is Erie 6th Ward, 11th District. And I apologize, when the agenda first went out, those were reversed, and it said 6th District, 11th Ward. But it is the 6th Ward, 11. We wish to move that polling place out of the New Vision Church on West 26th Street to 1603 West 32nd, the Mount Calvary Lutheran Church. We had used that church a couple elections ago to briefly house Erie 6-8. It's very close to the border of 611, within a block. So we feel like it's a good move for the voters in terms of it not being, it's actually closer to them than the current location. And it also allows us to just have one district at the New Vision Church. It was somewhat crowded at the New Vision Church. We had a district in the basement and a district upstairs. And that created some concern from some voters. So this allows us to go back to one district at New Vision, and 611 being at the Mount Calvary Church. It's a good facility. Jim Chirpak of our warehouse has looked at it. It's ADA compliant. There's sufficient parking. And so I also recommend this change to the board.
I'm not sure what happened to Mary.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I see we lost you. Do you want me to go through any part of this again?
You were finishing your comments about Erie 611.
Okay.
So I don't think so. We could do a motion at this time. I know we have a bit more on our agenda. Do you want to go through all of it and then go back to do the vote?
I think you would want to have separate votes for the certification and for these changes. So
Yes.
certainly would be an appropriate time now if you wanted to take the proposed changes to a vote.
All right, thank you. I will entertain a motion for the proposed changes outlined by Mr. Smith.
I make a motion to accept the proposed polling location changes as proposed by Mr. Smith.
I second that motion. It's been properly moved and seconded. Mr. Smith, will you do a roll call on the vote?
On the relocation of Mill Creek 2, Corey 2, and Erie 611, Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Chairwoman Rennie,
Yes. All right, thank you. We would then move on to a possible certification of the 2021 Erie County primary election ballot. And we would do this with the understanding, I just want to say that if the Commonwealth Court upholds Judge Brabender's decision of April 2nd, Mr. Andrzejewski and Mr. Hershey will appear on the Democratic and Republican ballot for the office of Erie County Clerk of Records. And should the Commonwealth Court overturn that decision, they will not. All other areas of the ballot are certified or will be certified as presented with this potential vote. Should the court uphold Judge Brabender's decision, the new lot draw will have to occur. to vote on the possible certification of the primary election ballot 2021. It will be done without including either name that are currently under appeal. So if it is upheld, if Judge Brabender's decision is upheld, we would need to do another vote to add them to the ballot. Does that sound proper, Mr. Talarico?
Madam Chair, besides the Andrzejewski appeal, I believe there's one other appeal that's been filed. Is that correct, Doug?
Actually, there is a hearing for reconsideration going on as we speak for Trevor Pearson, Harbor Creek, candidate for Harbor Creek supervisor.
Right, but hasn't, his name escapes me, former county council running for county executive. He filed an appeal, didn't he?
You're thinking of Ed DiMatteo, perhaps? No, Ed did not. He was, well,
He was running for clerk of records.
yeah, I don't think he filed a motion to reconsider that decision. In the case of Mr. Pearson, he didn't appear at the hearing, and there was a claim that he wasn't properly served, and that was part of the basis for the motion.
Well, I guess the point that I want to make, and you could check that, but very simply, the election board does not have any choice in publishing the ballot without Mr. Andrzejewski and Mr. Hershey appearing on the ballot. And the same would go for anybody who filed an appeal to the Commonwealth Court. And that's because when you file the appeal, the decision of the lower court is suspended or stayed. So the ballot that the election board should be certifying should not include Mr. Andrzejewski, Mr. Hershey, or any other candidate who filed an appeal with the Commonwealth Court. Now, sometime down the road, if the Commonwealth Court decides to affirm the lower court decision, then the election board will have no choice except to place Mr. Andrzejewski, Mr. Hershey, and anybody else who filed an appeal that the Commonwealth Court sustained. So it's basically pretty simple. Anybody who filed an appeal with the Commonwealth Court, the parties affected do not appear on this ballot, nor does the election board certify the ballot with any of those names on it.
Understood. We have a comment in the chat regarding Trevor Pearson, who was Judge Brabender ruled in Pearson's favor. And I don't believe there's any outstanding appeal regarding that one, unless somebody can correct me on that.
I'm not aware of one.
One hasn't been filed anyway.
Okay.
But are we sure, Doug, about whether an appeal has been filed in the DiMatteo matter? And the other issue is, if there is still an outstanding petition filed for reconsideration, and Judge Brabender hasn't ruled on that, then the jury's out with respect to whether names their names are going to appear on the ballot because they would still have a right to file an appeal to the Supreme Court.
Hershey and Andrzejewski.
So Andrzejewski is an easy one because we know that we filed an appeal. So clearly his name and Hershey's names do not appear on the ballot. But for any other candidates who have filed an appeal or who have the right to file an appeal, their names would not appear on a ballot either.
Okay. So
And
I would,
Nicole-
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chair, Nicole also typed in that no court order has been received in the election office yet regarding today's hearing.
Okay, so, and Tanya, could you tell me, could you tell the board? Could you explain what the judge did in the Pearson May case?
Yeah, so Judge Brabender decided that Pearson should be on the ballot, that he's made an effort and that he was interested in being on the ballot. Pearson did have an attorney with him and May did not. And Pearson's attorney also brought up the case law in the cases where candidates of other parties were challenging petitions, and they were not allowed to. So
Okay, well, the question is, what did the election board do? Was it May? What did the election board do with the petitions that were, the nomination petition that was presented by either May or Pearson?
we have the petitions. We never returned them.
Okay, but was it the board's action to accept the petitions? The nomination? petition?
Yeah,
Okay, so who filed the objections?
Pearson did.
Okay,
Pearson claims that he was not served, so he wasn't aware of the court hearing.
okay. All right, but I'm trying to get back to the beginning. Did
Mr.
May file a
Talarico?
nomination petition that the election board accepted?
Yeah, the issue was that Mr. Pearson didn't take his ethics form to the governing body. So it really didn't have anything to do with us.
Well, what I'm trying to understand though is whether if the election board accepted May's petition and the judge ruled that you should have, then May is on the ballot.
May was always on the ballot. It's Pearson that was in question.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So
And
May, we don't have a
accepted-
problem.
We accepted Pearson's petitions because everything was correct. He just didn't take his ethics form to the Harbor Creek Township.
Okay, and so the judge recently ruled that he should remain on the ballot?
That he should remain on the ballot. His first ruling was that we should remove him from the ballot. Pearson appealed that or asked for reconsideration. And today the judge decided that he should be on the ballot.
Okay, so the judge simply affirmed what the election board already did, except May for the ballot.
Right.
Except
Okay, so
Pearson.
we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay. But we do have to determine whether, and I thought that that an appeal was filed by Mr.
DiMatteo.
DiMatteo.
I'm not aware of any appeal on the DiMatteo case, Tom. I don't believe one was filed.
Okay,
As you might recall, he had severe problems with his ethics form. He didn't sign it. He had the wrong year. Judge Brabender removed him on that basis. The plaintiff's claim was that in not signing it and not filling it out correctly, it was the same as not filing it.
Yeah, regardless, my concern was only whether DiMatteo filed an appeal to the Commonwealth Court. And if he did, that would change things.
All right, if I could entertain a motion, then it would be to approve the ballot as it is. That would include Mr. Pearson on the ballot. It would not include Mr. DiMatteo, and it would not include Mr. Andrzejewski or Mr. Hershey pending a different decision from Commonwealth Court. Would that be correct? All right, then I will entertain a motion as stated to approve the 2021 primary ballot such as outlined.
I will make a motion to approve the 2021 primary ballot as outlined. Do you want me to repeat that whole with the names or not the names? Or just as is? As currently is?
I think as presently is. There's no real changes.
Okay, then to accept it as it presently is.
And I will second that motion. All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Mr. Smith, would you conduct a roll call vote for it?
On the approval, certification of the 2021 primary ballot, Mrs. Showerman,
Yes,
Chairwoman Rennie,
Yes. Mr. Smith, are there any additional reports that you would like to make regarding the election report? Any additional comments?
I can just let the board know that the ballot has been thoroughly checked. Our vendor, Dominion, has done an electronic construction. So that part of the operation is ready to go. We have coming up logic and accuracy test on the ballot. That'll be the week of April 19th. That occurs at the warehouse, and that's in essence a mock election where ballots are put through all of our 149 scanners, and it's a double check that the software is correctly counting votes that go through scanners. The poll worker classes are going to be let me make sure I have it right. The week of April the 26th, we're going to have fairly large classes, probably 65 people. There will be sufficient space to keep some distancing, but was something that we heard after the last class last year was that some of the secondary inspectors and so on who weren't invited, that hurt the operation of the polling place, and that depending on the judge, quite often they rely on their inspectors to help them in setup and other matters. So we wanted to expand classes a bit to give more people at least some training, even if it's not their job per se. That just puts a couple people in the precinct with having heard the information about setup. We have between last year and this, Abby Williams and Mrs. Fernandez have been simplifying the instruction book for judges. After each election, of course, we hear back from judges that things that confused them, information they were lacking. We found that we had sometimes several different versions of really the same set of instructions. So we feel like the document as presented for this election will be better than it was last year. There will be notices, of course, sent out to the voters of the 3 districts involved in polling place changes that were approved today. So those notices will go out. We will also use local media to publicize those changes, as well as signage at the previous polling place, directing voters to the new polling place. Of course, as always, we will work with the political parties to help get the word out on anything like that. The board should also be aware that there are, in fact, 4 questions on this year's ballot. It will be a 2-sided 14-inch ballot, larger than last year, which was an 8x11. That will somewhat impact scanning time at precincts, slow it down just a bit. Because of those questions, of course, ordinarily one has to be a member of the major parties to vote. Because of the presence of the questions, there will be a so-called nonpartisan ballot, which will just feature the questions so that persons that are independent, belong to a political body, minor political party, are also able to vote at the primary, either by mail or in person, and they would be given this ballot, which features questions only. I think that about does it for now. Obviously, we will hold up on some matters until we hear from the Commonwealth Court. Perhaps Attorney Tallarico might wish to just put on the record what's upcoming in that regard.
Thank you, Doug. I do believe that the members of the election board and county council were provided with a copy of the Commonwealth Court's order. And that was dated April 1. That's a scheduling order. So I've already ordered copies of the transcripts of both hearings. Those were just released. They were first given to Judge Brabender. He had to review them for any corrections or mistakes of the court reporters. He released them Monday, which was yesterday. So I then ordered copies of the transcripts myself. I got them today. We are required to file a concise statement of matters complained of with the judge. I've already dictated those. Those will be filed tomorrow. Our briefs are due with the Commonwealth Court. Well, first, the judge has an opinion to issue if he so chooses, not later than Thursday. And we have to file our briefs not later than Friday, April 9th, this week. So it's similar to all of the lawsuits that were filed last year in the run-up to last year's general election. The time periods for filing briefs, for filing and collating reproduced records have all been squished appropriately to give the court enough time to issue decisions, and then hopefully to give the election boards enough time to prepare the ballot and other matters as far as sending out the ballots by mail, et cetera. So since the Commonwealth Court will have everything by this Friday, I would say that we should have a decision from the Commonwealth Court. If not by the following Friday, the 16th, then certainly by the following week, the 23rd of April. So I was wondering, Doug, I know that May 2nd is the last date to send the ballots out, but I was wondering, I would, the election board probably wants to send the ballots out before then. So what is the plan? How early do you intend to send the ballot that the board just approved out, the mail-in ballot out?
Well, we have to send out the military ballots as approved today. Those have to go out. As you all recall, I believe, in our discussion with our printer, I guess I would say that in order to give voters a chance to get ballots back, I mean, we'd be very hopeful about sending them out that week of April 21st. I know you've kind of advised us to hold off as long as we can. But we'll begin working with our printer to have everything we can in place so that once we get a decision, they can proceed immediately getting those out. I would say in order to prevent the kind of problems that we've seen where people don't have time to return their ballots, we really should be thinking about returning those, sending ballots out the week of the 19th. That would be my preference. That still is very tight, but
Well,
I don't see how we can go much later than that, honestly.
Okay, well, I think that's fine. If we don't have an opinion from the Commonwealth Court by the 19th, then we just have to send them out. Now, as far as our printer having to send them out all over again, I mean, what is the anticipated batch of mail-in ballots that the board thinks that they're going to be sending out?
We think it'll be close to 20,000.
20,000?
By the time it's all said and done. It's currently about 15.
Now, as far as the work of the printer, it looks as though, even though the printer will have to reprint the ballots, it pretty much looks like they're going to be printing the same ballot, and that if there's any changes, it will only be adding a couple names. Is that right?
That's right.
So they don't have to reset things. They only have to work to add a couple of names, which isn't a lot of work. It's just sending the same thing for the most part out all over again.
It's all really the related timeframes where the real problem occurs, is them getting to voters returning them in a timely way. But we are going to speak to the printer to consider the idea of having both versions of the ballot ready electronically, so that if a decision came down and we had to send something out, that there wouldn't be any delay on that account rather.
And the printer is is going to be preparing a ballot that doesn't have to, for the general election anyway, that will have all of the names consistent with the Commonwealth Court's decision. So they'll be preparing for that anyway, right? In other words, the only modification that the printer is going to have to do is to 20,000 ballots by adding the names to a couple of names to 20,000 ballots.
Well, that, and of course, all the paper ballots that we will need for election day. But that's a little less of obviously a little less of a time crunch, because those we would just have to be ready to pack into voting machines by the week of May 11th. So that's a little more time.
Okay, so hopefully, it's possible that the Commonwealth Court will issue a decision by April 16th. But if they don't, then the election board should just go ahead the following week and send the ballots out, mail-in ballots out.
Mr. Talarico, is there anything further the election board can do to request that the Commonwealth Court expedite the decision? I realize that they are doing that essentially, but is there anything further that we can do to get that decision?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that there's lots of appeals that are being taken. It's not just the Andrzejewski appeal, but they're being appealed from 67 different counties. So they have lots of issues. And I'm pretty, we filed the appeal. They issued this order on the same day that we filed our appeal. So that's quicker than you could, we filed it April 1, they issued an order April 1. So I did tell the board at the last meeting that I spoke with the prothonotary, the head prothonotary at the Commonwealth Court. And he assured me that the Commonwealth Court was prepared for this. They'll be heard by different panels of 3 judges. So the Commonwealth Court has 15 judges, 5 panels. So they'll go through these as quickly as they can, being fully aware of the problems or the problems that have been created by the increase of mail-in ballots. But it's really up to the legislature to deal with this problem. Back in 2019, the legislature passed a bipartisan Act 77, which authorized and deliberately created the mail-in ballot. Now it's 2 years later, and unfortunately, the legislature, instead of being involved in creating more time for election boards to put this process together in time for the election, I assume that there'll be a time when the legislature finally decides to change the rules to allow election boards and candidates more time to go through this process so that we could account for the anticipated objections that might be filed and the time constraints involved in sending out mail-in ballots. But they're not doing that right now. Instead, as we know, that across the country, the legislatures are still fighting, the idea of what some of the legislatures think was a fraudulent election. So we have, I think, 300 proposed bills in Pennsylvania alone that are dealing with matters of, suppressing the vote and things like that, or matters that have been created as a fallout from last year's election. once that passes, they'll start to get their heads together and deal with the problems that election boards are facing with the increase in mail-in ballots and the time, but yet using the same time constraints that have not been addressed yet by the legislature. So there's not a whole lot we can do.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Smith.
I just wanted to correct something for the record. The ballot is in fact 17 inches long, not 14. Secondly, while we were talking, I reached out to Mr. DiMatteo per Attorney Tallarico's remark. And in fact, he has filed an appeal with the Commonwealth Court to be placed on the ballot.
Okay,
So that's, and that's fine. The election board just authorized the ballot. And they authorized the ballot with the provision that Mr. Andrzejewski and Mr. Hershey will not appear on the ballot, and provided that an appeal was filed or not filed in DiMatteo's case, those names, well, that would be different, because didn't the election board accept DiMatteo's petition?
They did. We did.
All right, and so his name would remain on the ballot then, pending the Commonwealth Court appeal. Because his name is on the ballot to begin with. Judge Brabender issues an opinion taking him off. But that opinion is held in abeyance and suspended until the Commonwealth Court issues its opinion. So Mr. Andrzejewski and Mr. Hershey are off the ballot, but Mr. DiMatteo remains on the ballot pending the Commonwealth Court's decision. Is that clear to everybody?
it is. I believe that our vote would not have to be taken again in light of that, because it covers everything that was approved by the board, and that might be in question by way of appeal.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right,
May I ask a question real quick, Mary?
yes.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. I tried to raise my hand, but I couldn't find the button. So just so I have this clear, we're gonna possibly send out one ballot while we're waiting on the results of from the Commonwealth. And then we could possibly send out a second ballot, which would have, might have Mr. Hershey and Andrzejewski's name on there. So my question is, if we get a first ballot back from a voter who's voted, and we send them a second one, but they don't return their second one, do we then count the first ballot that doesn't have all of the candidates on it?
Well, we're only talking about two offices now. While we're talking about the same office, clerk of
Yeah.
so yeah, we're only talking about one office, but three candidates. And so it's going to depend on, it's going to depend because my short answer to that question is you'll only use the second ballot.
Okay.
And you'll discard-
So none of the first ballots that we send out will be legit,
That's
or they're
correct.
not going to be counted. So then why are we sending out a first ballot?
We're sending out a first ballot because that is the ballot right now, and the ballot is subject to change by the Commonwealth Court.
We will hold off sending out a ballot as long as we can, pending a decision by Commonwealth Court. In other
Okay.
words, we'll wait as long as we can wait, given the constraints of the printer and the mail process.
And also potential voter confusion.
Okay,
All right, so right now, the ballot is as the board passed it, with all of the names on them that were originally and should be on the ballot, except for Mr. Andrzejewski and Mr. Hershey. Their names will not appear on the ballot. And for two reasons, because the Board of Elections never accepted those ballots, and an appeal was filed to the Commonwealth Court. So if there is a change and a second ballot does have to go out, and we're only talking about the mail-in ballots, of course, because the issue will be resolved for the poll workers in the general ballot. So we're only talking about the 20,000.
right.
The 20,000, if it has to go out, the board will have to use the media, and the election board itself will have to accompany the second mail-in ballot that goes out with an explanation or some kind of attention grabber that tells the voter that their first vote, that they have to vote the second time, and that the first vote for the office of the clerk of courts, or clerk of records, excuse me, will not count.
Okay, but the rest of their votes will count for the other offices?
I think can I just interrupt here just briefly? I think what we're going to realize as this goes on is that the logistics of it are yet to be determined. If this drags on for a couple of weeks, then obviously we will have to make some sort of contingency plans. I'm hopeful that a decision will be reached in a shorter time, which would help things enormously, in which case we wouldn't have to worry. If it drags out too long, then I think we will have to make some contingency plans within the elections office. And that may necessitate some action by the board. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see.
It has to be thought through. We're only talking about one office. And so maybe the second ballot that goes out is a limited ballot and only refers to the one office, the office of the clerk of records.
Well, certainly, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
In other words, there wouldn't be
think
any
we-
reason to send out a full ballot involving other offices if the voter already voted on those offices and there's no changes to the election ballot.
Councilwoman Showerman has her hand up.
I just wanted to say that if we are going to wait as long as we can, and I think if it comes close to that date, that we'll just schedule another meeting and have these discussions at that time.
Mr. Smith?
Perhaps we should consider being ready to schedule a meeting the week of April 10th or so to, not that we have to determine that date today, but to reconnoiter the situation and come up with a workable plan. In the meantime, I could also look into some historical practices in these types of situations, whether we can even send out a limited ballot. I'm not positive about that. But as has been stated, all these logistics are going to depend upon what happens in real time with the court.
All right, I mean, I would say let's look ahead to possibly having another meeting 14th, 15th, or the latest, the 16th. And we can firm that up later. Does that sound
Yes,
okay?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Attorney. Tim-
When you look at historically whether this issue has come up before, it would have only come up before in the context of an absentee ballot, more than likely military ballots, because we don't have much of a history with the mail-in ballot.
Agree.
So it's probably, this problem that we're having now is probably unprecedented.
Right.
And I think it's, the election board could only do what is reasonably possible and fair. And that may be, as Ellen suggests, we should have a second meeting where we could discuss the most reasonable and appropriate way of dealing with the issue, which may involve a limited ballot that is sent out that is limited to the one office, namely the clerk of courts, clerk of records.
All right. Well, we'll pull together a meeting, at least keep the contingency open for, I would say mid to late next week, which would allow us some time to do some contingency planning then, and wait on the court's decision until then. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right, if not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Thank you, everyone. This concludes